Hello, and welcome to the Alabama Public Health Training Network. Thank you for joining us today for our program, Human Trafficking Awareness for Public Health Providers. If you have a question about anything being discussed today, please call or email during our broadcast. The phone number and email address are on your screen now and will appear again later in the program. Also, the handouts, sign-in sheet, and evaluation are all available online. You'll need to register for this program in order to access those materials. Continuing education credits have been approved for nurses and social workers for today's program. In order to receive credit for this training, you must watch the entire program, then complete and return the sign-in sheet and evaluation. While content may continue to be relevant, continuing education credit will only be awarded for 1 year for nurses, expiring on January 31st, 2017, and 2 years for social workers, expiring on January 31st, 2018. If you are watching this program on demand and want to receive a social work continuing education certificate, then you will need to complete the social work test and send it in, along with your sign-in sheet and evaluation. If you are watching this program live, there is no social work test required. I'm Renee Carpenter, State Social Work Director for the Alabama Department of Public Health. And with me is Twan McCardy, founder of the Well House in Birmingham. And Twan, I didn't tell him much about you because I want you to tell your story, okay?
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, and it's just doing this type of training is just absolutely amazing. And so thank you for the invitation and for the Department of Public Health and looking at this, because this is a public health issue that people don't look at. So I think the first part I want to talk about just for a few minutes is my story and how I got into this and doing the training. So I really want to focus mostly on my teenage years and my childhood, because most of the people that I hope are watching will have interaction with kids. And as social workers, as a social worker myself, we fail sometimes. And we don't always hear the other side of the story and finding out why we failed. So a little bit of my history is my mother and father, when they got married, my father was a police officer. And 2 years later, when I was born, at 3 months old, he went to prison for the first time. So I grew up in a single-parent household because I'm my mother's only child, and was told my father loved me all my life, but he wasn't there. He was in and out of prison, and so I couldn't understand what love meant, because I had this skewed concept of love. And then abuse was going on in my house, which was called spankings, but it was leaving marks, and it was pretty bad at times. So at 12 years old, I ran away for the first time. One of the things I want to make sure people take away from this training, or there's several things. Drugs are not the problem. Prostitution, strip clubs, and pornography are never choices, ever. Of the women I've helped, I've never seen anyone that started as an adult. It starts as a child. And, you know, if that's all you've ever known, that's all you've ever known. I mean, healthy kids from healthy homes don't run away, is another thing, too. We tend to look at someone's behavior as opposed to the mitigating circumstances that are going on in their lives. So at 12 years old, I lived in Carrollton, Georgia. I'm originally from Georgia, and I ran away and wound up in Birmingham. I was trafficked so much to Birmingham that it became home, and that's where I live now. But when my mother picked me up that night and took me back, a social worker had been assigned to me. And so during this time, it was JPO, which is juvenile probation. And she took me to this social worker, and the social worker looked at me at 12 years old and said, "When's the last time you had sex?" The week before, I had been raped for the first time by 3 boys. But because I didn't fight back, and because I thought it was consensual, but I was 12. And one of the things that well, I think it was a detriment for me, but the reason that my behavior was looked at is because I was considered a smart kid. I skipped several grades in school. I scored very, very high on the any standardized tests, like way above where I was supposed to be. And so people were looking at what was happening, you know, what was going on with me, as opposed to what was happening in my life. So when that social worker asked me that question, I thought I was marked, that something was wrong with me. I mean, how do you ask someone, a 12-year-old, when's the last time you had sex? And I've even seen case records today, Renee, that will say something in the record, sexually active at 9. That's not possible. You can't be sexually active at 9. You're being raped. Mm-hmm. So that social worker, not only did she ask me that question and we had a long interview, but she proceeded to put handcuffs on me at the end of the interview and took me and locked me up. So I was in juvenile jail for 3 days. It was one of those scared straight type things they were trying to do, which didn't work. It just made me angrier. between 12 and 15, I ran away more times than I can count. I mean, I don't even know how many times. They put me, I'm 45, and they put me in a psychiatric ward. During that time, they didn't have adolescent psychiatric wards. They only had adult. So for 17 days, I was in a psych ward for an evaluation so they could figure out what was wrong with me. And me and it was one other child in there. That was one of the most horrible experiences I ever had. You know, foster homes didn't want me because I was considered a flight risk. I actually heard a foster mother tell my social worker at one time, I will not take her into my home because she will not stay long enough for me to love her. So no one wanted me. My father he was out of prison. He got out of prison when I was 11, what we thought was the last time, but it wasn't. He died in prison a few years ago. But I was blamed, consistently blamed. At 14 years old, a judge looked at me and said, "You are incorrigible." And I said, "What does that mean?" He said, "There's no hope for you." I was actually at a group home here in Alabama recently talking to the kids. And when I shared that with the girls, one of the girls looked at me and she said, "A judge just told me that too." I was at an event at church the other night in a city here in Alabama, and a little girl that was in a group home that they'd actually brought the girls to come hear me speak, she looked at me and she said, "A judge told me that last week." We are still blaming our children for their behavior as opposed to looking at what was happening. There was a particular time my mother had caught me. I'm trying to run away. She duct taped my wrists and ankles and beat me with a sawed-off broom handle, called my social worker to come get me. My social worker applauded her for spanking me. And then my social worker took me and put me in RYDC, which is juvenile jail, again that night. When they got me there, they stripped me nude so they could take pictures of the bruises that were on me. I was blamed. No one ever looked at what was happening. And so at 15 years old was the last time I ran away. And I met my first pimp. And did I know he was a pimp? Absolutely, I knew he was a pimp. But what other choice was there? Where else was I going? I had been in and out of every group home just about in Georgia. I'd only been in one foster home, and she actually happened to be the director of the juvenile probation office. Her and her husband were foster parents, and I stayed there a few months. That was the only foster home I was in. It got to the point where there was no place in Georgia that wanted me. So they were consistently locking me up as opposed to trying to help me. I had been abused by some of the house parents, which is, I hate to say, is still not uncommon. And it hurts to say that, but when I met this pimp, what else was there? I mean, this guy, he took me home, that's what you call it, and there were 4 other girls there. And 2 worked the streets and strip clubs, and, streets and truck stops, and the other 2 worked strip clubs. And he had me doing something different, so I thought he loved me more. For the first few weeks, he had me selling cocaine. And he taught me everything he thought I needed to know about cocaine. Up until this point, I'd tried marijuana, but I didn't like anything, so I didn't want to do drugs. And every night he's sending me out to sell drugs. And every single day during those first few weeks, he's telling me, "Don't do it, don't 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 do it. It's the worst thing you could ever do. It's the worst thing you could do."
So in a way, he was protecting you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but he was teaching me everything. I probably know more about cocaine than the police do. I could probably train them about some of the stuff that he taught me. So for several weeks, all I'm doing is selling drugs, and that's how I'm making my quota, because all of us girls had a quota to make. You don't know what the other girl's quota is, but you do know what happens if you don't make quota, because your punishment doesn't happen in private. Your punishment happens in front of all the other girls, whether it's a beating, a rape, a gang rape, a torture, whatever he decides at that time. And the guy that I'm talking about was one of the nice ones, just so you know. Mm-hmm. So every single night we're sitting down at our dinner table and eating together. We're having family meetings about everyone takes care of each other. We're going out to buy clothes. I mean, we're doing stuff as a family. I'd never seen that. And so I thought he loved me more because I didn't have to do what the other girls did. And this one particular night, he sends me out, drops me off, gives me the drugs. There's not enough drugs to make the quota he had given me. So the tables had turned. Did I physically submit at 15 years old to being sold? Yes. Someone paid for sex with me at 15, but I was not capable of consenting. It was rape. There is not one person who ever purchased sex for me that I wanted. And it's been really difficult. It's been a long healing process, and I'm still in it, with identifying that, because I didn't want to identify that. I blamed myself, and that's one of the reasons I'm really excited about this training, so people understand that we do blame ourselves, because that first pimp told me some truths that we uphold. He told me that I would be arrested, and he would not. And the first time I was arrested for prostitution, I was 16 years old. And yes, I lied about my age. I was tired of going into juvenile jail, so I went to jail. I was booked into the jail, taken to the mattress room to get my mattress, and raped by the officer who took me to the mattress room. So I couldn't trust police. This pimp told me that people would drive by me every single day and not reach out and help me. Every single day it happened. He told me I could leave anytime I wanted to. Where was I going? There was nowhere to go. I mean, I didn't have a skill set. I was 16, 15. He also told me that I couldn't walk into a church with the clothes I had. And if you think about this, for those who do attend church, if you see a girl with a spandex mini dress, it's obvious she has on no underwear and 6-inch heels. Are you going to embrace her? Or are you going to cover her up? You know, I was even talking to a pastor the other night. He said, I probably want to take her to the clothes closet. I said, then you're condemning her immediately. And she feels shame and you're judging her. And so we talked through it and he kind of understood. So, yeah, I physically submitted to being sold that night. It's not something I wanted. And probably, I think it was a day or two. If it was that long before I started using that cocaine he gave me. Because even the next night he gave me cocaine to sell. But I still had a quota, so it didn't matter how I made the quota, as long as I had the money. Mm-hmm. And so I started using the drugs. And yes, it becomes this vicious, ugly cycle of addiction. But I didn't want the drugs. Like, you're raped 30 times a day. You have to have something to get through it. So it does become ugly, an ugly cycle. But drugs aren't a problem. Healthy people don't get high, ever. That's not an issue. Actually, there's some other programs that talk about after coming here, we realized we were sick people. Because the sickness starts before. Right. It doesn't start because of. So I probably had about 5 or 6 pimps. Actually, somebody told me the other day I needed to think about it. I was kidnapped by a set of 2 pimps together at one point in time. I've been sold in every state but Alaska and Hawaii. I've been sold in Canada and Mexico. Like I said earlier, I was trafficked so much to Birmingham that it became home. One of the largest networks in the United States, trafficking circuits, is Atlanta, Birmingham, Nashville, Memphis, and Chattanooga. And it's still identified. And I just found out that where we're sitting is there's a new smaller circuit that's come up. So there's even one coming here through Montgomery, and Georgia, and North Florida.
85?
Is it the
85 course?
Yes, it's the 85, and I think, I can't think of the name of the city in Georgia, but it's kind of almost directly across from Montgomery in Georgia. Macon. Macon? Yes, Macon. So it's a problem everywhere, and that's what we tend not to understand. My face doesn't bruise anymore. I've been beaten so much. Actually, right now, a few years ago, I've had so much structural damage. By the grace of God, I've never had any broken bones. But because of being beaten so much, the structural damage, my teeth were literally loose, and we pulled all of my teeth, and these are plates. I'm going through and getting implants now so I can have a better stability in my mouth. But he was even afraid that I wouldn't have enough bone structure to be able to do that because of the abuse. This is from a straight razor. The scar above my right eye, I've been annihilated in the media because I won't tell who put that scar there. He beat me and left me for dead. He's still on national TV. His championship ring put it there. And, I mean, literally I was annihilated with comments in the paper when a local paper posted that, about that. God hadn't told me to tell who he is, and it's not mine to do. But we go through severe beatings. Our trauma is completely different than it's completely different across the board because we don't just suffer physical trauma. We have physical trauma, sexual trauma, emotional trauma, psychological trauma. Actually, when I was driving here, a truck went by me and it's Jake brakes. He put on his Jake brakes and I jumped.
So you have PTSD.
I have PTSD. And actually, when I met my counselor the other week, I told her, I said, over the past few months, I've had some episodes. I said, why all of a sudden now are they coming up again? You know, I've had a couple of night terrors recently. And she said, Twan, that may not ever go away. She said, you may have periods where it's not active. But New Year's Eve, I was almost in the fetal position with fireworks. And that hadn't happened in years. Wow. But so you just never know when it's going to come. I was in the car not too long ago and was physically shaking because of a noise I heard. And I couldn't even figure out what the noise was. I mean, I couldn't figure out what it was. So, I mean, it's that bad. I suffer from Stockholm syndrome, too, that we'll actually talk about during this training. But we're blaming our kids. And that's one of the reasons I really want to talk about that portion of my story, because we've got to stop blaming our children for their behavior and start looking at what's happening behind the scenes. Something's going on in that house. And then the other thing is, is that when we turn, did anybody in here have an epiphany on your 18th birthday? Did anybody online have an epiphany? And this is what people don't understand. I understand there has to be a draw of child and adult. I get that. But we're not financially secure, emotionally stable, and spiritually mature at 18 just because you turned 18, but all of a sudden she's a criminal, and we blame her. The other problem is that prostitution is a crime. She's still considered a criminal. Purchasing sex is a misdemeanor. And I know prostitution is a misdemeanor too, but purchasing, I mean, literally, it's like getting a speeding ticket. It's that bad. We've got to do something about that. And it's not okay. We sexualize everything in our society. My favorite candy in the world, I will not, since I saw the last commercial, I will not eat it anymore. It actually pulls back the wrapper of the candy and says it's better naked, or it's better undressed. You know, everything today is sexualized, and we've got to stop that. We've got to let our kids know and look at what's going on behind the scenes, and let them know that they're loved and they're valued and they're treasured. She's not a trophy. She's a child. She's someone's daughter. She's a princess of the king, and we have got to start looking at that as opposed to what's going on. Because I mean, there's kids now. I have not been to a youth group where I've spoke that a child in there didn't admit to me they'd been trafficked or knew someone who had. And I've only spoken to one youth group outside of Alabama. Every single one.
Goodness.
I know. And there's always a woman that comes up to me after an event or something that talks to me about her sexual abuse or her rape. It's that pervasive, and we've got to stop turning a blind eye to it. So, do you have any questions about my story right now?
I think we're in awe. I mean, at this point.
Well, people ask how I got out, and so I'll go into that a little bit. In 1997, I was arrested in Birmingham, and I didn't call the pimp I had at that time. I mean, I did it the old-fashioned way. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. So you know, I'm a 2-time convicted felon. First time I went to prison, I was 19, and I had to do better. Because I had already been through so much abuse, and because I blamed myself, because it was, if you hadn't run away when you were 15, it wouldn't have happened to you. It's your fault. Kind of like a rape victim. Well, if you hadn't took that drink, or if you hadn't went into that bar, or if you didn't wear that short skirt, so we blame ourselves. And so when I didn't call the pimp that time, the pimp I had at the time, I went into what friends of mine call freight train mode. Because I'm a pretty determined person, and I went and got a bachelor's degree, wrote some substance abuse treatment programs that I don't even believe in anymore because I know drugs are not the problem. My resume is phenomenal for the glory of Twan during that time, because I had to redeem what I thought had been stolen from me, and so finished my bachelor's and began working on 2 master's degrees. Relapsed on those drugs and was re-exploited in 2006 and 2007. I went back to prison in 2008 and got out in 2009. I did finish both my master's degrees, but what's changed my life is I met God. And in that process, going to counseling, having women love me, and that's actually what changed me, is a woman loved me right where I was at. She didn't, and I was in a pretty bad place when she met me too. She didn't care what I was going through. She didn't care what I've been through. She just loved me. And so many people ask me, what would have changed you as a teenager? I said, well, the same thing that changed me as an adult. Because we all want to have love and belonging. Mm-hmm. I mean, food and water is necessary, but I really think we could do without food and water if we had love and belonging, because that is a core need. That's why people don't feel loved, or they don't feel like they belong somewhere. That's why suicide happens, or suicide attempts, or drugs, all of that stuff. And so we have to understand that we are worthy. And when you're told for so many years that you're not worthy and you're a commodity, it's very difficult to overcome that. Very, very difficult. So, I finished those degrees, and now here I am.
So you have 2 felonies and 2 master's degrees.
I have 2 felonies and 2 master's degrees. And the other thing is the FBI hunted me down. They were searching for me in my teen when I was a teenager, because I had been in a group home, and my boyfriend in the group home, him and his brother had killed 3 people. And so FBI and GBI, which is Georgia Bureau of Investigation, because that's where I was at, were looking for me. And then Richard Comey gave me an award 2 years ago. Yeah, so my life finally makes sense. I mean, I have been a child of DHR, a social worker at DHR, and a client. I have stood in front of judges and been sentenced I mean, multiple times as a child or as a teenager, and I have stood next to judges to help them or to offer assistance. And I mean, now we work with judges with helping the ladies. I'm actually doing the judges conference next week. I'm one of theirs. It's really crazy what
the turnaround,
and the redemption. I mean, and then here I am with you now.
Right.
I did not want a degree in public health. I used to work at the School of Public Health. I did not want one, and it's just my life makes sense now. Finally makes sense because I can share from my own experience what happened to me, so people can understand. And we have to stop blaming our children. So that's a little bit of our testimony, and I know we've got some objectives and stuff we want to cover. And so, if you've got your books, I want you to open the Grace to Grace Human Trafficking Training Resource Manual. And I wrote you a little letter there at the front, but on page 3, we're going to start going over these red flag indicators. Some of these I pulled are medical. The reason I want you to understand the medical term is because you are in a public health setting, and
right.
I know a lot of people that are watching will. They could possibly see some of these signs. So red flags to look for are going to be similar to domestic violence, but there are some other things that are not the same as domestic violence. And so we really have to look for them. And so delayed presentation for medical care. If they've got some problems that they have not addressed in a very long time, maybe you do an x-ray or see some broken bones that were never set. Things like that show former abuse. To give you an example, and I'm probably throughout this training I'm going to use some things that have happened to me, because all of us have been to a doctor, all of us have been to a health department, all of us, and haven't been helped, but no one saw it, or either that or we were blamed. She's just a prostitute, and she's not a prostitute. She is a person who's being prostituted, and I don't care if you call her abuser, her boyfriend, her pimp, her trafficker, her drug dealer. It could be a girl. She is being prostituted. It's not her choice. I have not met anybody. This is what I want to be when I grow up. So look at that delayed presentation for medical care. Any discrepancy in the stated history and the clinical presentation of the injury or anything that's going on. Just like for domestic violence victims, I fell. I ran into the door. But it's obvious that it's not. Look at those. Scripted or memorized stuff. If she's got a script down that she's telling this story and she tells this exact same, literally like she's memorized something, something's wrong. Something's wrong. And a lot of times, especially in the health departments, the women will go, or the girls will go from one social worker to another one to get all the help they need. And if she's told that same story, like verbatim, please be aware of that, because that's definitely a big red flag, because she has been told to memorize stuff. Her stated age is older than what she looks like. I told you I was 16, and I said I was 22, so they put me in jail instead of juvenile jail. But it was obvious I was 16. I still look like a kid. Kids are kids, and you can tell, especially if you're doing a medical exam. I've got SAGs and stuff now that I didn't have when I was 16. So when you're doing a medical examination, ensuring that you're observant of these things. Subordinate, hypervigilant, or a fearful demeanor. Doesn't have any ID. Doesn't know where it is. Somebody else is holding her ID. Or she has to ask for her ID from someone.
Is that a common thing?
Absolutely common.
Okay.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why we at Wellhouse, and we'll talk more about Wellhouse later, we will help get ID. Because a lot of times they don't have it. Reluctance or inability to speak on their own behalf. If someone else is answering the questions for them, need to be very aware of that and looking at that. If she happens to be a foreign national or it appears she might speak a little English, but the person wants to answer all the questions or provide the translation, because I do know a lot of the departments that you do have have people that can Hispanic or a couple other languages, and so make sure that they're there and available. Evidence of lack of care for previously identified or obviously existing medical conditions. And I'm sorry, I skipped one I really wanted to touch on. Companion who refuses to leave. And this is what most people in the healthcare setting don't realize, is that you have power and authority. And take her, say, I need to take you somewhere, and don't let them go. You know, in hospitals, when I train the ERs, I will tell the nurse, take her to x-ray and say he can't go or she can't, whoever the person is with her. And you can actually do that. Get her away if you think you could possibly talk to her for a few minutes. Tattoos or other marks or insignias that could claim ownership. Dollar signs that are tattooed on her. There's actually, if you'll, you know, on the scan codes on,
Barcodes?
yeah, the barcodes. Some of the girls are getting barcodes. Or you'll see stuff, like, well, it's a little vulgar, but you'll see something like BITCH, or something like that tattooed on her, or initials or names that are obviously not her name, but looks like it's a street name or something. Bags of money are tattoos, some of the tattoos, and there's actually a new one going on now where it's tattooing here. They're tattooing the inner lips to claim some. One of the girls that I've assisted, she had tattoos on her face with his name. So you just you know, be aware of tattoos that don't look normal or they're someone's name.
I've heard of numbers. Is that
numbers are some too, just like the old concentration camps.
Right.
The numbers or vaginal tattoos. And I know that sounds horrible, but there's a number of those that I've seen too. The side of the neck tattoos are some too they'll have their name on the side of the neck. So
and it's the pimp's name.
Oh yeah, the pimp's name, and usually his name's like Smooth,
it's
Big
a
Money.
Nickname.
Yeah, it's something that's related to the streets because you're not going to normally know his real name. Very few people will. Specific red flag indicators for sex trafficking: recurrent sexually transmitted infections. I have had every STD there is. Even syphilis. We caught it soon enough that I was able to get the treatment for it. I've had everything, multiple times. Just making sure that you're aware of that or the history. Frequent or multiple pregnancies are signs of a forced abortion. Sometimes abortions are done somewhere else. They're not done in a setting to keep her, and so she may have trauma. I know I've had so much physical trauma, sexual trauma, that I've had PID, which is pelvic inflammatory disease, 3 times. And I went to the same hospital every single time. And no one ever asked. No one ever asked. Now, we do know that one of the times I had PID was because I had gonorrhea in my fallopian tubes, as opposed, so the tests back then weren't testing positive for gonorrhea. We didn't find it out until until the PID came. And I found out I had the gonorrhea in my tubes. But no one, not one nurse, doctor, or social worker, it was my fault. They were blaming me. Not one asked. And I was hospitalized. I think I had PID like 5 times, but 3 times I was hospitalized in the same hospital. And no one ever took the time to look.
Wow.
So we've got to be aware of those things, especially in these kind of settings. Frequent relocation to avoid detection. Trafficking is not movement. Smuggling is a crime against a border. Trafficking is a crime against a person. Is movement involved? Absolutely movement's involved. And the reason there is, and there's men who purchase sex everywhere. And there's money everywhere. And on top of that, you've got Super Bowl is a huge event. I can remember, because I'm from Atlanta, I can remember there was a meeting of about 10 pimps that were in 1995 planning what they were going to do for the 96 Olympics. Because remember, the Olympics were in Atlanta in 96. But the big game Alabama, everybody's football, I don't understand that. But anyway, that's a whole nother topic. But even that game, the back page, the ads online go up for the girls because there's a lot of men who attend those events. And they want entertainment. So anyway, that's relocation. Is not necessarily always true, but it is a big sign. I've got some stuff in here on labor trafficking. A lot of this information in the handout that we've got here, I want you to keep. We may not talk about all of it, but I just wanted to make sure that you could refer back to it. So there's some information here about labor trafficking. Labor trafficking does happen, and I will touch on it for just a bit, because in the United States we believe in the business model, and the business model says that I make the most money I can, the most profit I can with the least amount of purchase. So if I'm a farmer, or let's just use a farmer as an example. If I'm a farmer and I have a Hispanic population working for me and I'm paying them $5 an hour, which is not minimum wage, but it's more than they would make in their country, and I'm providing them a place to stay, that's still trafficking. And because we believe in that business model, it's why it happens here so much. It's happening everywhere. All over labor trafficking is happening all over the United States. It also is happening in restaurants and nail salons. One of my friends told me that after she was a part of one of my trainings, and she went to get a pedicure, I think she's like, "You have ruined me." She said, "I used to enjoy these. Now I have to pay attention because something might be going on." So in situations like that, if someone else takes the tips, and especially at restaurants or those kind of places, just be aware of that, because labor trafficking is happening. So on the next page, on page 4, there's talking about the commercial exploitation of children, some of the red flags for those. So their presentation at the healthcare setting with non-guarding or unrelated adults. I had trained a hospital in Birmingham. I trained the ER nurses, and we had tried some of the stuff we had gone over. And a little girl, 14, had come in there and had been there 12 hours with no parent, but she took herself to the hospital. They were about to discharge her because they couldn't do any treatment on her because she was 14 and no one was there to sign for her. One of the nurses that I had trained walked by the room and heard her say something. I wasn't sure what she said, but it was related to the trainings that I'd done with him. And he pulled the nurse that was in there out because they were literally about to let her go. And we found out it was the same. I had just gotten a phone call a few hours earlier from FBI that they were looking for a 14-year-old that had run away. And here this girl had got away from, she didn't run away. She was talked away. That's what happened. And then she got away from them and took herself to the ER. And
so she escaped from
her captor. She escaped from her captor and took herself to the ER. But because she didn't have a parent with her, they were not going to treat her, and she was terrified. She was terrified to answer any questions or do anything. And this nurse finally walked in there, and he asked her just a few questions. You know, how did you get here? What was going on? And she started opening up to him, and found out that it was her. So that's a big sign if they come in on their own, or if it's a random person or someone you can tell it's not their guardian. Please be aware of that. Access to material possessions, especially a child that you know they can't afford. That doesn't make any kind of sense. There's no way they could afford it. Over familiarity with sexual terms as a child. We've got to stop blaming our kids about what's going on in their lives and the behaviors they're having. An excessive number of sexual partners. She's 13. She can't consent to sex. It's not legal. She's not even of age to consent. We cannot have a conversation with her about her sexual activity and not understand it's rape. She can't consent. Either she's not in school or he's not in school, because this does happen to boys too, or they run away, or there's a lot of truancy. There is no child who runs away that stays gone for more than a day that is not trafficked. And when I say trafficked, it's not necessarily sex for money. It can be a couch surfer, that they're trading sex for food, or they're trading sex for a place to stay. If they're having to trade sex for anything of material possession, is trafficking. Period. And we've got to start understanding that even more.
So you're saying they'll be picked up within a day?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yes. Absolutely. They have no skill set. I mean, teenagers have no skill set. How are they going to survive? How are they going to survive? And someone's going to take advantage of them. And we can see, because of the way we are in society, we over-sexualize everything. It's okay. And then if she's already been blamed for being sexually active because she was 14, 14-year-olds can't consent. I don't care how smart they are. They're not cognitive enough. I think you need to be 20s or more. I know I didn't have any common sense to my middle 20s. Right. I'm 45 and I don't think I still have some. So the reluctance to talk about a particular tattoo. I like what we were talking about earlier. If you ask them, oh, that's pretty, or something like that, and they don't want to talk about it, or they cover it up. A fearful attachment to that cell phone. And I do understand that we love our phones. We love our phones. All of us love phones.
Well, especially teenagers.
Especially teenagers, but if they've got a fearful attachment to that phone. The other thing to look at is if they're throwaway phones. Who carries a flip phone anymore? Don't raise your hand. Are you serious? I'm sorry. We have a flip phone in the audience here. Amazing. But you know, that's a trash phone because they're cheap. You're not going to see them throwing away an iPhone. You're not going to see them throwing away those kind of things. But if they have a throwaway phone, there's also reloadable Visa cards and stuff. Be aware of things like that in the adult area. Some more. Some of these red flags may be part of the grooming stage. How many of you have seen the movie Taken? Have you seen it? I'm sorry. That is not trafficking. That's probably about 1%. There's a reformed pimp I know that he says, and I call this a beautifully horrific quote. It's beautiful because it brings awareness, but it's horrific for what he says. He said, I could walk into any middle or high school event and point out 5 to 10 girls that would leave with me willingly within 30 minutes. Willingly. So she may be being groomed to get ready, you know, for him to use her or exploit her in some kind of way. So be very aware of that. More red flags. They're not free to leave, come and go as they wish. That's a big one. I do want to say this, and this is something that a lot of people don't talk about, especially in the healthcare setting. If a girl ever pulls something out of her shoe, like her ID, if she takes her shoe off, that is a big red flag. And why do you think that is? I tell you what, sweet lady, why do you think that is?
Well, so she could always just have it there.
Well, she can have it there, but the thing about it is I'm a girl and I can be raped. But you can't take my shoe. If you try to get my shoe off, you're going to get kicked. So she keeps what's important in her shoe. If she has it, money, everything. So if you ever see someone pull something out of their shoe, please be aware that there's something going on. These other red flags are actually from the Polaris Project. They're under 18, providing commercial sex acts. There's not a lot of states right now that have a safe harbor law, and safe harbor says that a child can't be arrested for prostitution under 18. But because nationwide, the federal law says that anyone under 18 that is being used for commercial sex is a crime. We need more of the other laws, though. So if, let me talk about strip clubs for 1 second, because that's not a choice either. The first pimp that I told you about, the first time he put me on stage, I was 15. And when he was gone, the bouncer wouldn't let me leave. So it's not a choice either. It's not a choice. So if they're in any kind of sex industry, and I use that term very loosely, I really don't like that term. But if they're in some kind of sex industry and they admit it, there's something else going on. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes, even if she says she wants to be there. If you would have talked to me several years ago, I would have just told you that I was a prostitute, a whore, and a dope fiend. It was my fault. I chose to do it. And what I didn't understand is what I was suffering from. Because I didn't want to blame anyone else but me. Because as long as I could control it, it was okay. So if they are not allowed breaks in working, owe a large debt to someone, some of this is related to foreign nationals being recruited. If they have poor mental health, physical health, abnormal behavior, like they're fearful, anxious, they're very fearful of law enforcement. I do trainings like this with law enforcement, and I will show them my hands. Because for the first 10 minutes, I shake because of PTSD.
Wow.
I visibly shake. And I will hold my hands out because my hands are like this as I'm standing in a room in front of them. That's how bad it is. And so if they're afraid of law enforcement, then that's a sign too. Malnourished, has few or no possessions. They're not in control of their own money, financial records, or don't have a bank account. Or they don't have any ID, again, or someone else has it. And some of the other ones we had already went over. Or this is a good one. Numerous inconsistencies in their story. If the story doesn't match up, if the story doesn't match up to the timeline, if you're taking some kind of social history on them, please be aware of what that story is and talk to them. Ask open-ended questions. And I'm going to get into some more about the open-ended questions soon. So in here I've also, and I hope you have downloaded it or printed them out, we've got some assessments that are here. I've got two. I actually brought two different assessments. One is for adults, and that's the Vera. And there's actually two. There's a short version and a long version in these assessments. Let me mark my spot here so I can come back to it. These you can use. Both of these are free. I mean, these are not something that I did not create these. These were created by the Vera Institute for one, and the other one is the Child Protection Services in Florida, and they did a really, really good job with these. And so, if you'll flip through it and look at some of the questions, I wanted to go to the adult one first, which the front of it says "Screening for Human Trafficking." If you have that one, as you can see on page 13. Is section 1. Do not read to client. Please do not read this to the client. Don't do that. Some of this stuff that you need to ask, I know, but don't have a conversation.
Right.
Because she's already afraid. And if this is really going on and you think you need to ask more of these questions, then tread lightly. But don't read it to her at all, please. And I think sometimes as social workers and helping professionals, we tend to do this. Name.
And mark.
Date of birth. You can't do that when assessing her in order to get information from her. You have to talk to her. Sometimes you may have to offer her something to eat. You may have to get her something to drink. You may have to get her a change of clothes. You're going to have to do something to personalize her, to make her human, to get a proper assessment. And forensic interviews. Please don't expect on the first time for her to admit it. And this is very similar to that. It's just in a different setting. Don't always expect, even if you get every single red flag, don't always expect her to admit it right immediately. Because we're ashamed. We're embarrassed. We're guilt-ridden. I mean, I suffered from, I did not have low self-esteem. I suffered from self-hatred. There's a big difference. Low self-esteem would have been good. That would have been a positive thing in my life. Self-hatred, I hated the fact that I walked. I hated the fact that I talked. I hated the fact that I breathed. So I wasn't going to tell you anything. And if I did tell you something, I didn't think you believed me. The other thing is when you're walking through these assessments, if she does or he does open up and they tell you a horror story that you go, oh my gosh, that happened on some TV show that you saw. No, believe her. Mm-hmm. I think this is where we failed. Let me give you a couple examples. Okay. I'm 17 years old, and the pimp I was with at the time was playing a video game. I think he was in his 20s. He was playing a video game with a guy that he was teaching to be a pimp. Something that happened. They got into an argument. He picked up his gun and popped him on the forehead with the barrel, and the gun went off and blew the top of his head off. They drug him outside, down the steps, threw him in the woods, and then made me clean up the brains. You can't make stuff like that up. You cannot make that kind of stuff up. That stuff, you don't see that kind of stuff on TV. When someone's telling you a horror story, believe them. That can't be made up. I mean, when I was telling you about the scar above my right eye, he beat me, and I was pregnant with my second daughter, and left me in a park for dead. I was so badly beaten that when I finally regained consciousness, because I was knocked out, I was left for dead. When I regained consciousness, I walked down, and because it was in a park, and I walked down the hill to get to the street, and it was probably about 2 o'clock in the morning. You can tell during the night when it's kind of quiet. And a woman with her child in the car picked me up. That's how bad I looked. You can't make stuff like that up. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So we've got to believe her when you're assessing her and you're talking to her, and she tells you something horrific, or she tells you about a gang rape or something. Believe her. We don't make this stuff up. I was at a conference. I was training a set of social workers, and a woman stopped me in the middle of it, and she said, Twan, she's boo-hooing. She's crying. She said, Twan, I had a 15-year-old that since she was 13, she said, I worked with her for 2 years, and she told me some of these same stories, and I did not believe her. She said, I thought she was making it up. And she's sitting here crying, and she said, I failed her. You have got to believe those stories. And if you get them in these assessments, if she looks at you and says, I lost my virginity when I was 10, that can't happen. Mm-hmm. She was raped. We've got to start looking at things like that and stop putting in case records, sexually active at 9. I don't ever want to see that again. Mm-hmm. I hope you don't see that in any of yours.
No, I don't think I have.
Good. So the assessments are really, I mean, of course you get your basic demographic information with these assessments. And the good part, one thing I like about these, or especially this one for adults, is it has a portion to be used with foreign-born clients. This is the situation, though. Since I developed Well House and been rescuing and helping girls off the streets, I've only assisted 2 foreign nationals. Everybody else I've helped are American citizens. And the majority of the women I've helped are Caucasian. So we have got to take that stereotypical lens off. And we've got to try to reach her right where she's at and look at her, because trafficking is no respect of persons. Mm-hmm. It's no respect of colors, no respect of socioeconomic status. I mean, I've helped people that came from very wealthy backgrounds. This morning before I came here, I was in a really affluential area. I'm doing a small engagement, and they didn't want to believe it was happening in their town. And one of the police officers said, yeah, right here. It happens right here, so it's everywhere. And we've got to keep our eyes open more. But this has a section about the foreign-born nationals, which is really good because it lets you know how they got here. It gives you some questions to ask. And then also, as you can see, and this is why I really wanted to use these, is because if you get a yes answer, then it points you down to another section where you can actually start, go in a little bit deeper. And so on through here, hold on. There's actually a page, and I told you about it before we started. I tried to mark, and I forgot. Did I mark it? I did not. Some of this is about labor trafficking, but you can still have those signs too, or you'll see those signs in there too. And you'll see some other, there you go. On page 21, you'll see some of the questions. Did anyone you worked or did other activities ever trick or pressure you into doing anything you did not want to do? And if they say yes, ask them the next question. If you're comfortable talking about it, give me some more examples. Tell me what happened. Don't ask those rapid fire questions. Try to draw out and get as much information as you can. And that's one of the reasons I really recommended it and wanted to use these assessments. The next page, 22, this is it. Did you ever have sex for things of value? Number 5. For example, money, housing, food, gifts, or favors. We miss that. We think trafficking is just about the money. It's not. And we've got to talk to them and find out if they've ever done anything, especially the teenagers again. Food. I have seen food used as a weapon to make people perform. And when I say it's used as a weapon, literally forcing them to eat, making them throw up so they don't want to eat anymore. Mm. Then to making them do other things, or getting them to be to a state where they're so hungry that they'll do anything.
Right.
And keeping them starved. So food is a weapon too. See, as you see down there, it said, did anyone you ever worked for live with control how much food you could get? And we tend not to ask these kind of questions. If you go on a little bit further, there's a post-interview assessment for you. And right after that, there's a short version of this tool. And it's still good. But I wanted to make sure you all had the long version and the short version. And if you don't necessarily have to use this complete tool, but you could pull some questions from it to ask on a regular basis to all of your clients. To a few that you think that would really benefit the area you work in. Based on some of the red flag stuff we've talked about. And you can determine better than I can what would be most helpful in your area of work. And the next one is the child assessment, and it's the one that says Human Trafficking Screening Tool Administration Guide at the top. And this was done by Florida. And it's not proprietary, so you can use it, you can pass these along. And, some of these right here, the reason for screening is also some red flags. The history of running away or getting kicked out 4 more times, in addition to a history of sexual abuse. Current incident or history of inappropriate sexual behaviors, not necessarily limited to prostitution. Use acknowledgement of being trafficked. If she's told you she's being trafficked, believe her. Believe her. If she says, I have a pimp, believe her. Or if she says, I have a wife-in-law or a sister-in-law. Or there's another one. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But if they tell you they've been trafficked, believe them and do something about it. And later on, I'm going to tell you what to do about it. They have no personal items or possessions. They're not allowed to speak. This is about for children, or they're unable to speak for themselves. Again, the material items, they have no knowledge of where they are. They have no knowledge of where they are, what time it is, or if they're not oriented to any of that, you need to make sure, you need to find out why. They don't know where they are. Sometimes a kid will ask, where am I? Kids are good at asking questions. Where am I? What city is this? That's a huge red flag and a sign. And so I'm really glad this assessment tool addresses all these. It goes back into the suspicious tattoos. Men, guys that are watching this, if she flirts with you, overly flirts, or is suggestive, that's definitely a sign, especially if it's a child. And that's all they've known. Some of this stuff is related to, because it's DCF in Florida, some of it's related to Florida, but you can pull these questions out and use for here also, or wherever you're at. And some of this stuff is different for kids, some of the questions. Do you get on the internet or Wi-Fi, or use phone or tablets? What kind of sites or apps do you use? There's some new stuff out there. Keep updated with it. There's a calculator app now that actually stores pictures. And what it looks just like a calculator. When you open the app, and it works like a calculator on your phone. But you put in a 4-digit password, and it opens up a folder for pictures. So we need to be aware of our kids. And that's one of the things I did want to touch on, too. My daughters, I have a 16-year-old. I have all her passwords. But she also has all mine. She has every single one of my passwords. I want to trust her, but I want her to know that she can trust me, too. And so there's never any question. I can pick up her phone anytime, and she can pick up mine. It doesn't matter to me. But I wanted her to understand that I'm not going to ask her to do anything I'm not willing to do to her, with her. And I think we missed that. So find out what kind of apps they use. And please don't think that our big social media sites don't have traffic. A lot of those are used. A lot of, and I'm talking about the ones that are used every day normally by the majority of people. They're still used for trafficking. I mean, be aware. Somebody messaged me the other day in a private messenger, and I did report him, but I really felt sorry for him because I was like, you didn't look at my page or who I was at all. Oh, no. Because the message was, hey, sexy, you want to make some big money? Yeah. I was like, I was mad, but I really had to laugh there for a minute going, are you just stupid? I have no idea. You didn't know who I was. And so kids, find out what they're on, what sites and all they're on. If they've ever agreed to meet anybody online, that they met online. Or has anybody ever asked, those kind of questions. If they have, a 16-year-old cannot have a 24-year-old boyfriend. Okay? That's just not. If she's 12 and says her boyfriend's 20, I mean, these are issues. These are problems. These are things that we tend to think, well, she's just fast. And we've got to stop looking at it like that and start looking at the fact that she's being abused. A 12-year-old don't need to be going out with a 20-year-old at all. Nor does a 16-year-old need to be going out with a 30-something-year-old or a 20-something-year-old. And we've got to start looking at those as signs also. Do you have any tattoos? This assessment's also really good because it does the same thing as the other one. And when you get the answer, it gives you where to go next. What do your tattoos mean? That's always a good one. Instead of, especially if they're ashamed of the tattoo like we talked about earlier. Brands, sometimes it's not necessarily a tattoo. Sometimes it's like you would brand a cow. Mm-hmm. It's a burn. It's a scar. It's a scar. It's an actual scar. Who was with you when you got gang relation? Is there any gang relation? How many times? Where do you live right now? Your current living situation. If they've run away, where have they gone? Who do they live with? I mean, if a 15-year-old says I live by myself, something's wrong. There's something going on there. Do you pay for where you live, and how do you pay for it? It's very important to answer these questions. They're most likely not going to have a job, but still asking the work information just in case they do, because sometimes they are used as an indentured servant. And just these are just some other great questions. I like section F about leaving or running away from home because that lets you know, it's actually on page 13 of this tool. How many times have you run away or left, and how long were you gone? If the child was gone 12 hours, probably not a lot happened. They were just hiding in the woods or something, got scared, or then got caught. If they've been gone a few days, or they say I ran away and I was gone for 4 weeks, what do you think they did during those 4 weeks? If they're 14 or 15, they didn't get a job. Somebody was taking advantage of them somewhere and finding out those. And runaways or homeless youth are big targets in this area. So anyway, it gives you other questions about running away. And the next one on the next page, while you're away, how'd you support yourself? You know, there are friends that will hide out friends in their house when the parents aren't as interactive with the kids as they should. Or if she says I stayed at my friend's, find out from that friend if she stayed there or not. You know, get other information. Dig a little deeper. This is one of the things I talked about in the beginning letter of this workbook, the pamphlet, the manual. Think outside the box. You know, and please forgive me for saying this, but a lot of what I learned in school, I had to throw out the window to be able to address and think outside of the box and find those other questions or those other things to help and to be able to help someone. So think outside the box. And I'm sorry we got 2 students in here for me to say that. Anyway, this is a really good sexual exploitation, coercion, and controls on page 16. So it gives you some good questions to ask. And some of these, you know, we talk about open-ended questions, but some questions are just yes or no. And it's better to ask those questions sometimes, especially if you're trying to just talk, you know, to find out some just information and then later on go into more detail. Because if she has been abused at home and she's a minor, you don't want to ask questions that could lead or guide her to say something that she doesn't want to say or that could potentially hurt someone else and it go into law enforcement and a forensic interview. So just you have to be careful about those. And again, don't always expect that she's going to open up the first time. Exactly. It's not going to happen all the time. And there's also a post-screening assessment in here for you, for the worker who's doing this. Like indicate the likelihood that the youth is a victim of trafficking. What did you think based on what you found? And you're going to have to make a professional decision. And I know that just sucks sometimes. There's times
it's not easy.
It is not easy just to make a decision. So that's assessing the needs of the victims, and just make sure you keep those. Those you can give to anyone. Pass them out to your coworkers, whoever you want to, for these assessments. And they are a little bit lengthy, but at least you have the information. And there's some good stuff at the beginning too of that first one from the Vera to talk about the training and the screening process to help you become more familiar with that. I think it's time for a break.
Okay. Well, we've been going for about an hour now, so why don't we take about a 10-minute break? But before you go, I want to remind everyone that we also are taking questions. And we're also taking phone calls. So if you have any of those, go ahead and get those in. And Twan's willing to answer them at any time while we're on the air. Yes. So we'll see you in about 10 minutes. Welcome back. And I want to remind you that Twan is taking questions either by email or by phone, so go ahead. The information is on your screen, so go ahead and call or email those questions in. Do we have any questions in the audience before we pick back up?
Before you ask that, before anybody says anything, one of the questions that was asked during the break is, what do you mean by being sold? So sold was many different forms. I was sold between pimps and bought between pimps. I was traded. I was given away. They trade girls, and you're sold every single day for sex. And the average is about 30 buyers a day, 15 to 30, sometimes more, according to what your quota is. And holidays are even more. So your quotas go up on holidays. And that may sound crazy, but it's not. you have to make more money like on Thanksgiving and Christmas and stuff.
Wow.
Any other questions? Like, go back.
I have a question.
Okay.
Okay. How can churches get involved? So, for example, a pastor's wife, like if there's a safe house, or how can they get involved is the question.
Well, first thing they can do is have the question. The question was, how can churches get involved? And I think everybody needs to be involved. But the thing about the problem with churches is they don't want to talk about sex, much less sex trafficking. And so, then the pastor needs to. My suggestion is the pastor talk about not only sex but pornography too. Because at the very beginning of this training, there's 3 things I said that I really want people to take away. Prostitution, strip clubs, and pornography are never choices. Just like now, we're sitting in front of a camera. Mm-hmm. Nobody can see what's going on in here but us.
Right.
Nobody knows. It's the same thing with pornography. And so churches really don't want to, it's getting better. A lot of churches do want to have those conversations. But having those conversations with the pastor, with the congregation, because we tend to think that pornography is okay. It's not cheating. That's what, I've even had a wife message me. She's like, I'm okay with my husband watching pornography. At least he's not cheating. And I'm like, but he's raping that girl on that camera every single time he looks at it because she's not there by choice. Even if she says she is. And that's what we're about to get into with the Stockholm Syndrome. You're welcome. Any other questions?
I guess I'll go.
Okay.
So my question was that you mentioned that there's a lot of professionals out there who may be ignorant of this problem or who may just not feel like dealing with it, so they ignore the red flags. My question is, how can we, not only raise awareness of the problem, but how can we fix this dehumanization process from professionals who are supposed to be trained in this helping process to help them, or to at least not feel like dealing with it?
Actually, I was going to get into that a little bit about re-victimization, because as social workers we tend to re-victimize with questions and demeanor. It's really, really important that I think after so many years, sometimes it's very early on, this is our job, this is our case, this is what we're supposed to do, and this is how we're supposed to do it. And this is where the agency I work at, the red tape I have to go through, and the parameters I have to stay in. And we do have to think outside the box in these situations and go that extra mile. I don't think we can go into social work. Actually, I know we don't go into social work, number one, for the money. We don't do it for the money. Number two, we're going it to help people. But if we're not trying to go that little extra just to help her, then I think we're missing it. So I do want to talk about that. But going back to her question and coming off of that, I want to make sure everyone understands what Stockholm Syndrome is. Do y'all know, anybody y'all heard what Stockholm Syndrome? You know what Stockholm Syndrome is? It starts as a child. And I was actually, Renee and I were talking prior to this. I used some of this in the manual that we're looking at. We're on page 6 of the manual that says Grace to Grace on the front. I put part of the article in here, but in the references, you've got the entire article. This is one of the best articles I've ever read about Stockholm Syndrome, and I used a portion of it. It is very long and lengthy online. It's actually 4 different internet pages, and they're really long. But I had read this a number of times, and I finally went to my counselor in a session and said, I have Stockholm Syndrome, and I've had it since I was a child. And she looked at me and she was like, well, of course. And I was like, but I didn't know it till now. And so, and I'd read this article prior to that, and actually the very first bullet point you see on there is abused children. And so when I talk to people, for those of you who don't know what Stockholm Syndrome is, let's just read this first part of it. On August 23rd, 1973, 2 machine gun carrying criminals entered a bank in Stockholm, Sweden. Blasting their guns, one prison escapee named Jan Erik Olsen announced to the terrified bank employees, the party has just begun. The 2 bank robbers held 4 hostages, 3 women and 1 man, for the next 131 hours. It was 5 days. The hostages were strapped with dynamite and held in a bank vault until finally rescued on August 28th. After their rescue, the hostages exhibited a shocking attitude considering they were threatened, abused, and feared for their lives for over 5 days. In their media interviews, it was clear that they supported their captors and actually feared law enforcement personnel who came to their rescue. The hostages had begun to feel the captors were actually protecting them from the police. One woman later became engaged to one of the criminals, and that was Patty Hearst. and another developed a legal defense fund to aid in their criminal defense fees. Clearly, the hostages had bonded emotionally with their captors. Actually, the man that was held, he was an attorney, and he defended one of the robbers. But that's where the name came from, is that I think it was the first time it was actually seen. But you've worked with kids. Kids defend who?
Their parents.
Their parents.
Their abusers.
Their abusers. It starts as a child. This is not, I mean, it's developed, you can develop it in someone. Absolutely. And it's very easy to. But it starts as a child. Battered and abused women, prisoners of war, cult members, incest victims, criminal hostage situations, concentration camp prisoners, controlling and intimidating relationships. Stockholm Syndrome is real. We don't have a diagnosis for it as far as any axis. It's not there. But it is real. My first pimp loved me. You could not have told me anything different. And actually, I knew all of them loved me, even the one that was considered, he was a gorilla pimp. And you have Romeo pimps and gorilla pimps. Romeo are the ones who will treat you nice, buy you stuff. It's kind of like living a lavish lifestyle. And sometimes that's during the grooming process, but a lot of times it's while you're with them. Gorilla pimps will just beat you into submission. I mean, they'll beat you just because. I can remember one particular one. I was putting his hair in a ponytail, and I pulled his hair, and he turned around and slapped me. And he slapped me so hard I fell because I pulled his hair too hard. I mean, they're sadistic, and they beat, period. But you defend them. You defend them. And that may not make sense. But this is where the problem is, why don't you just leave? 35 years ago with the domestic violence fight, it was, well, she married him, why didn't she just leave? It's just not that simple. You can't just leave. A lot of them, where are they going? Because you've burned bridges. The likelihood of her being addicted to some drug is very high, so she may have burned all kinds of bridges because they're blaming it on her drug use. And this guy, or this girl, it could be a girl who's her trafficker, is taking care of her every day and saying, this was what was said to me. And I made the connection in my 20s, but I don't think I really made the connection until this past year. My mother spanked me when I was little, and she never told me, I'm spanking you because you did this behavior. She said, I spank you because I love you and I want you to do better. That's what she told me every single time. Now, the spankings were much more than spankings, but that's what they were called. That gorilla pimp I told you about, I beat you because I love you and I want you to do better. The exact same words. Exact same words. I just want you to be a better person. And you emotionally bond with your abuser, and that's what Stockholm Syndrome is. There is, with the girls, when when a pimp has more than one girl, it's called a stable. And so they're considered wife-in-laws, sister-in-laws, wifey. There's all kinds of names that you're called. And there's a competition among us to be his best. And she's called the bottom. And the bottom means that she may be in control. And it's bottom, B-I-T-C-H normally is what the term is. But she's in control of sometimes punishing the girls. So, but if one of the girls gets out of line and she doesn't straighten it, she gets beaten worse than any of them. And that's what people don't understand. So there's this emotional bond that forms through, and it is Stockholm Syndrome, that forms through because you're wanting to get closer to him. You're wanting his love. I mean, we all want love and belonging. And where else is she going? Society's looked down on her because it's her fault.
And this is the same person who's meeting her basic needs.
This is
food, shelter,
yes,
clothing.
just like children. This is the same. This is the person who's meeting those needs. I mean, they're making sure and they may, like we talked about earlier, they may use food, withhold food or something like that. But they're the ones who love her. He loved me. You could not have told me anything different. Nothing. And there is some rules on the streets. This one's kind of hard to talk about, but I do think it needs to be said. When you are pregnant, or if you become pregnant while you're with a pimp, he's the father. Regardless if he's the biological father or not, he's the father. And it's so ingrained that a few years ago, I had a young man call me that was the son of one of my pimps and said, I want to meet my sister. talking about my daughter. And I said, she's not your sister. But he had told him his whole life, you have a sister. So this is how far, this was just a few years ago. And I hadn't seen this man in 20-something years. So this is how long those psychological ties last. They last that long, and they're that deep. And they still think they have a control over you. And in some cases, it still is scary. It's very scary. Because, I mean, I can remember, I was like shaking for 3 days. Because I didn't know, I mean, this was not a good thing to happen.
It came out of the blue.
It came out, oh yeah, it just kind of, it was, I was sideswiped. I was blindsided. Yeah, it was crazy. So this Stockholm Syndrome is true. And so I really wanted to talk about, so you get the identification of it, and this is why I put this part in here. It's on the next page, page 7. And they have positive feelings toward their abuser or controller. Even if she's presenting with black eyes and everything, and she says, and this is, it makes so much sense. If I hadn't have done ... then he wouldn't have done this. It's my fault.
Her fault.
Yes, it's her fault. Negative feelings by the victim toward family, friends, or authorities that try to rescue them. Don't come get me. I'll leave when I want to. Where are you going? This is the mentality that I had. Support of the abuser's reasons and behaviors. Well, it's because he was abused when he was young.
Justifying it.
Yeah, justifying it. Rationalize it. Positive feelings by the abuser toward the victim. Of course he's going to love her. And it turns into that honeymoon cycle. Beating, just like the domestic violence cycle, it turns into that. But this is a lot more horrific. Because if you think, because your punishment could be a gang rape. That means that 3 or more of his friends, and possibly him, take turns. Back to back to back. And then the next thing he's loving on you. And so it's this give and take. It's a give and, does that make sense? Supportive feelings behaviors by the victim, at times helping the abuser. And that's when I was talking about the bottom. Because she will sometimes be more violent than the pimp. Because she has to be. Because if not, then her punishment is horrible. So you want to be the bottom. And there's a competition among the girls to be the bottom. But once you get to be the bottom, you realize what happens when you mess up. Inability to engage in behaviors that may assist in their release or detachment. I mean, where are they going? I thought I was a piece of dirt. I was worthless. I had no value other than sexual performance. And so that's why, for me, when I was talking about getting out of it, that I overperformed, and I had to be very successful in order to get rid of that for me. And that's a lot of girls like that too. It has been found, this is the bottom paragraph right above the last 4 bullet points that are on page 7. It has been found that 4 situations or conditions are present that serve as a foundation for the development of Stockholm Syndrome. These 4 conditions can be found in hostage, severe abuse, and abusive relationships. The presence of a perceived threat to one's physical or psychological survival, and the belief that the abuser will carry out the threat. I saw him kill that 16-year-old. I know he'll kill me. There is nothing you can tell me any different. I know he'll kill me. If he says he'll kill me, I know he will, because I've seen what happens. The presence of a perceived small kindness from the abuser to the victim. Well, I know after he beats me, he's probably going to love on me. He's probably going to take care of me or take me out to eat something. He may buy me something. That's normal. Isolation from perspectives other than those of the abuser. No, it doesn't make sense what you're talking to me about, Renee. You know what I'm saying? No, that's not normal. Where I live is normal. And so they're not going to want to they don't understand. I didn't understand what normal was, or that there was. This was normal to me. The perceived inability to escape the situation. Where am I going? Where am I going? If I've burned bridges, or he's isolated me, where am I going? I'm already a piece of dirt. My family says I'm a whore. Where am I going? There is nowhere to go. And so people don't understand that. But just please make sure that at some point in time that you guys go to that link that's provided in the references. This article is great. It is a long read, but it is really good at helping to identify and understanding. It has some stuff at the end of what not to do, especially if it's a family member or something like that this is happening to. But it has some really good stuff about what to do and how to love someone through it. So now there's some stuff on pages 8, 9. It just talks about, it talks about trafficking, gives some frequently asked questions. What does it mean? It's just some basic information that we're not actually going to go over. But I do want to start on, hold on.
We have a question,
Oh.
if you want to go ahead and take that.
Yes,
You wanna go?
absolutely.
Okay. It's an
The
email.
question is, what is a Jake break?
I'm sorry. Actually, a Jake brake is a transmission brake on the 18-wheeler. And so, in other words, instead of hitting the brake, you flip a switch and it slows the transmission down from turning, and it's really, really loud. It's really loud. You'll actually see, you'll be on a road somewhere in some areas and it'll say no Jake brakes. Let truck drivers know not to use them. I'm sorry. That was that's lingo, yeah. You got any other questions? That was okay. I apologize. Did anybody else have any questions? Did you have more? Okay, would you like, go ahead.
Well, in some of the other material that you provided, I don't know if you're going to go through it all or not, because it's kind of lengthy. But it was talking about how we can deter the suppliers and buyers for this industry. They said that they would be more reluctant to do this if they were added to a sex offender registry, imprisonment, public exposure, such as a billboard announcement, newspaper notice, internet webpage, or through a letter to their family or employer. And so my question was, how feasible is this to increase these punitive consequences for the suppliers and buyers rather than to the victims?
It's a great question. So let's talk about that. I was going to bring up demand a little bit. It wasn't in my objectives, but I do want to talk about it since you brought the question up. Let's have a demand conversation, because that's one of my favorites, just so you know. Sex trafficking is basic economics. It is supply and demand. If you get rid of the demand, the supply goes away and the pimp doesn't have a job and he can actually go back to selling drugs or something that he would actually get some time for. So right now, purchasing sex is a misdemeanor, and a lot of times he's just slapped on the hand. But, and I want you to think about this, the Department of Justice says that the majority of the purchasers of sex, their main demographic, are 18 to 60-year-old Caucasian men with expendable income. Who is that? Who is that in our society?
It's the people who make the laws.
There's the people who make the laws and pass the laws.
It is.
You know, and there's a lot of times when I'll be speaking in places, and men squirm, because this is what happens when a man purchases sex. He don't remember who all he purchases from. And so when I say I'm a survivor, he'll look at me and go, oh. I've seen it more than once. If we do not address the demand, and Shared Hope is actually where I got this information from. Linda Smith is the founder of Shared Hope International, and they're doing a big They're doing a big campaign addressing demand. We have to address the demand. We have to. My stand is that it needs to be a felony and he needs to be a registered sex offender. What we have found in John schools, a John school, so the audience knows, is when there's like 10 cities in the United States that are doing John schools. And what they're doing is they're arresting men attempting to purchase sex. And they have to pay a fine and spend a day in a school at this training. So it's an all-day thing where they meet with public health department, comes in and talks about STDs. And shows them pictures and goes through that. They actually hear from a survivor during this John school so they can understand that you're actually raping me. And this is not something I want. So they have this whole day thing, and at the end of it, they expunge it. There's only a 5% recidivism once a man attends a John school. So I truly believe that if we start addressing the demand, because what the Department of Justice says is true, that's who purchases sex. And so once we have more men on board, I'm not male bashing, but 95% of the purchasers of sex are men, and the other 5% are women, and it's usually in pornography, or they're supporting their husband or boyfriend or something in pornography. It's not actually purchasing a girl. But when men purchase, they don't consider it cheating. They don't, because it's not an emotional attachment. There's not a long-term relationship, and he's getting a physical release. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? So we have to address demand. Again, but the problem in the demand side is, that's where the problem is. This is the ones who are making the laws are the ones that are causing the demand. I mean, we even had, and this is public knowledge, I mean, it's in the media, a Secret Service. The Secret Service recently got their little hand slapped for being overseas, got caught going into the brothel, and they got sent back home, and they still have their job. This doesn't even make sense to me.
Right.
It doesn't even make sense. How can we say it's not okay? And that's what I'm talking about. We over-sexualize everything in our society. So the demand side is just, we've got to get rid of it. But there is, that's one of the things I did want to cover while there is the article, and I didn't realize that the first part was in another language, but it is by, that's actually just telling you what it is, yeah. It is the problem of demand in combating sex trafficking. And it's the one about Linda Smith, and the entire article is in here, so that'll be a good read at some point to understand, because she's done some really great research and work on the demand side. And they've got on their site, which I'm pretty sure I have it in here. If it's not, it's in there. You can go and watch some videos where it talks about the demand and understanding that is the problem. I mean, we can look at prevention, we can look at everything, but until we address the demand, it's going to continue to be a problem. So now I wanted to talk the question you had asked earlier about re-victimization, because as social workers, I know I've re-victimized unintentionally, blaming her. Well, why questions? They're the worst. Renee, why'd you wear that pink sweater today? Exactly. See, right. You're looking at me like, huh? Because I wanted to, and I knew I was going to be on the show. But you know, why questions are the most judgmental questions.
Right.
Why did you make that decision? Why did you do this? That is the most judgmental question, because I am sure every person watching, listening, sitting here has made a not so good decision and asked themselves, why did I do that? And not been able to give yourself a valid answer. We all make not so good decisions, but we can't ask those why questions at all. We're on page 10. I did want to touch on this in the Grace to Grace workbook, the manual. How do traffickers get their victims? We've talked about that a little earlier. They're everywhere. Everywhere. Pimps don't come after the girls. The girls I've rescued, I've never had a pimp come after them. Why?
They can go get another one.
Replace her just like that. Just like that. They don't always come from low-income backgrounds. Who's at risk? And we talked about the smuggling and trafficking. So let's go on page 11. Who is she? She's me. She's you. She's your niece. She's your daughter. She's my daughter. She's your best friend. I mean, I've rescued as young as 13 and as old as 59, and I've never seen where it started as an adult. There's always been some kind of abuse that was a facilitating factor at the very beginning that made her feel unworthy, and this makes her feel worthy. This is probably about the craziest thing that, and let me walk through it so you'll understand what I'm saying. It was power and control to be purchased, because it meant to me, and this is how you justify it, it meant that I knew he wanted me for my body, and I could control that situation. And that is so unhealthy and wrong. But that's the way you have to think in order for it not to be a rape. And at times, hazards of a job of a chef. They're chopping vegetables, they're going to get cut. They're putting stuff in the oven, they're going to get burned. The hazards of the job of being prostituted, you're going to get raped, you're going to get beaten, and usually the lifespan is 7 years. Once you're into the life. Within 7 years, you're dead. I had 4 friends I knew in Atlanta that were decapitated, and it was never mentioned in the paper. Not once. 4. I knew all 4 of them. At the shelter I founded, where there's a stone bench for the girls I know that have been killed in Birmingham in memory of them, because their name wasn't mentioned in the paper. We are dirt. We're a piece of trash. We are not considered. I've heard on police radio, I've got another non-human in the car again.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And we've got to stop looking at it like that. We've got to see her as a person she is. And as a social worker, it's very important that we see her. When any kind of training I do, when they say, how do I meet someone? First of all, you have to meet their basic needs. You're going to have to meet those basic needs. If those basic needs aren't being met, then you're not going to be able to make you're not going to be able to get through it all. If I'm hungry, or I'm homeless, or I'm naked, you've got to take care of those situations. Or if I have inappropriate clothing for the weather during that time, you've got to take care of those needs. Most people, she doesn't feel human. She doesn't feel worthy. She doesn't feel wanted. She definitely doesn't feel loved. And in order for us to get through, sometimes it's going to take something as simple as get her hamburger, make her a sandwich, talk to her instead of talking down, because we're talked down to so much that we expect it. You've got to change that. And I know sometimes we get in a hurry with that. I mean, we'll get this assessment out and go, da-da-da-da-da-da. And that's another thing in here. Don't ask rapid-fire questions. Do not ask rapid-fire questions. That is horrible. How old are you? What day were you born? You can't do that, because I can't think like that, and then I'm going to shut down. Because disassociation is the truth, too. It took a very long time, a lot of counseling in order for me to even recognize when I disassociated. And I could actually have an entire conversation with you being disassociated and walk away and not remember anything that was said. Nothing. Because something happened. Actually, the first time I was able to identify being disassociated was I was in a meeting. It was one of those rough meetings, and a person looked at me across the table and did this. And as soon as that finger got pointed at me, I shut down. And I didn't hear anything else that happened in that meeting. Nothing. Because I felt threatened. And so you've got to make sure that we don't do those kind of things when we're talking to her. And because she's got some feelings. So let's go to page 12 and let's talk about her feelings. Common feelings. Fear. She's terrified. And if she's trying to get out, she's even more afraid, because she doesn't know where she's going to go or what she's going to do. Confusion. Definitely confused. She's in crisis mode. We live in crisis mode 24/7. There is no relief. You're in constant crisis mode. Chaos is normal. And the thing about it is, and this is what we also have to look at, if my life is normal and smooth, I will create some chaos because it's normal for us. She feels worthless. Horrible. I told you, it wasn't low self-esteem, it's self-hatred. Mad. She's mad at the world. Mad at you. Mad at her. She's probably more mad at herself, because it's my fault. If I hadn't have done this, then this wouldn't have happened. Guilt. Actually, I think, and I've said this, I'm going to have to change that one. This actually should be shame. Because guilt says I made a mistake. Shame says I am a mistake. She feels like she's a mistake. She feels like she is a mistake. Pressures, next page. She's got all kinds of pressures. There's all kinds of things she could be facing. We've looked at some of the red flags. Some of those are medical conditions. There's all kinds of stuff going on. You don't know how many kids she has, or if she is still a kid, or what's going on. There's pressures going on in her life, and we're going to have to identify those. And again, she's always in crisis. Always. There is no time that she's not in crisis, and so she's going to be going through these phases down here. And I hope you know what these phases are, because these actually are some grieving phases. And you would think, well, especially if she's trying to get out or has gotten out, well, why would she be grieving? Why wouldn't she be grieving? She's lost everything that was normal to her. Domestic violence victims. It takes about 5 to 7 times for them to go and come back before they actually get out. I have found, and just in my own experience in talking to other survivors, that it usually takes us about 11 times of going in and out. So don't be mad if she goes in and out. So the anger, denial, bargaining, depression, acceptance, she's going through all these phases. And I hope you do remember the grieving process, that those aren't in order. And they tend to slip. You could actually have 2 in the same 5 minutes, or at the same time. Ambivalence, page 14. She is definitely going through a series of a phase of ambivalence. She doesn't know what's right or wrong anymore. Doesn't know how to make good decisions. She's terrified. And she is detached. She has been used like we're using these cups. As a good, as an item. So she is detached from everything. There is no way anyone in this world can be raped 30 times a day and not get a form of detachment. You have to. You can't live through that. Not be present and in your feelings, you'd be screaming and crying all the time. So in order, you develop a different persona. And a lot of times, our name, you have a street name, a different name on the streets. I mean, my name is Twan, but no one knew me by Twan on the streets. That was not my name on the streets. And so you become that persona as opposed to who you are. And so again, that's another part of taking her identity. And that's why, I mean, even the pimp has got a different name. A lot of times you won't know his name. And that's a form of detachment too. So you're taught to detach very quickly. But even children that are abused talk about detachment, and they talk about disassociation, that I went to my happy place when it happened, or I went there when it happened. I had someone ask me a couple of years ago, what is it like when you disassociate? Because they wanted to understand mine. For me, everything went black. It's like being in a room, like if we cut off the lights in here, that's my disassociation. It's like being in a room with lights, cut the lights off, there's no windows, it just went black. I literally remembered nothing. I would just cut the lights off. And I could perform, I could drive, I could do everything I needed to do and still be disassociated. So she's going to be detached. If you have a second interview with her, she may not remember anything y'all talked about on the first interview. And you can't hold that against her, because then again, that's judging again. Just walk back through it with her. We've got to go outside of the box on these. So, good questions. Page 15. There are some good questions that are close-ended, the yes or no, like we talked about on those assessments. So those are okay. Some of those are okay, but for the most part, don't do close-ended. Those are not the ones we want to do. Why questions? Definitely don't want to do why. The rapid fire. Questions containing the answer. Don't lead. Don't lead. And we tend to do that sometimes. You know, I'll give them here's some solutions in the question. And, you know, which one do you want to do? Well, none of those may be right. Or maybe what she's comfortable doing. And so not leading. Because at that point, she's going to feel like she's going to have to choose one of those things that you said in that question in order to get your approval. And that's not necessary. The good questions are open-ended. And there's some exercises in here on page 16 that you can read them and think of an open-ended question that would be helpful. So you can maybe do some practice. Because what I do know as social workers, just like doctors, we're in practice. We practice. And practice doesn't just mean we practice in interviews. I will truly, my kids think I'm crazy sometimes, but I'll truly ask questions out loud that I might want to ask someone, or something I want to talk about, or even myself just talking through stuff. Because when you hear it out loud or you write it down, you get a better understanding of it. So think about questions before you ask them, and practice. So resources. This is one, before we go into the resources, they're on page 17. I'm going to tell you a little bit about all those. But one of the things I did want to make sure, if you suspect someone's being trafficked, especially a child, report it. And I want you to report it to the National Human Trafficking Resource Center. I want you to report it to law enforcement. I want you to report it to DHR. And I want you to tell every single one of those agencies that you're calling another agency. If I call DHR or whatever Child Protective Service, I'll let them know I'm calling the FBI when I hang up with you. And I'll let FBI when I've already called DHR and reported this. And then I'll let somebody else know, whoever else, there may be a third. I usually try to call 3 to make sure that child does not fall through the cracks, or that woman does not fall through the cracks, because a lot of times it will happen. Now this is when it comes to law enforcement having information, sometimes you're not going to get any return things from law enforcement because you can't. DHR, I don't expect them to because of HIPAA and confidentiality. But you got to report it and let them know that you have called more than one agency, because we will drop the ball if we don't. And so the resources in here, the ones I listed were local for my area. But yeah, there is a FBI office in every state, and multiple throughout most states. So find out what your local FBI office is. It's really easy. You can go on the FBI website. You can find out where their local offices are. Actually, you can click them, and you can get their local number and their local information email. Also, when you email stuff to law enforcement, CC or BCC yourself on it. Do not lose that email if you're emailing stuff in. I usually CC myself on it, that way they can see it, that I've sent it to me, and I still have the information. And I know we can pull stuff up in the sent folder on our emails sometimes, but sometimes those are automatically cleaned out by our servers. So always send it to yourself and keep a copy. Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, that's the number. They're a statewide agency. They do the state troopers. They also help with investigations for trafficking. The fusion centers. I'm not sure too many people are familiar with fusion centers, but let me explain to you what they are. After 9/11, Homeland Security, when they figured out that this 9/11 could probably have been avoided or at least prevented if law enforcement agencies shared information. And so what they did is each state has at least one fusion center. And that fusion center, they are considered law enforcement, but their primary job is information collecting. And they will give it out to they bring together local, state, and federal law enforcement with information. Because we do not have, even though we have NCIC, which is the National Criminal Information Database, we don't have a national place to share legal information or law enforcement information. So the fusion centers are actually the ones that are trying to bring that together. So a lot of times, actually, I think every fusion center has a human trafficking analyst in it now. Now, does that tell you the problem we have in the United States, if I'm not mistaken? So the national agencies, NCMEC, which is National Center for Missing Exploited Children, call them if you have information. The National Human Trafficking Resource Center, this number is really easy to remember, 888-3737-888. Program in your phone. If you see something that looks suspicious, they actually do data collection. Every person that works at the NHTRC are attorneys. All of them that are on that, they have a 24/7 hotline. They're attorneys. And I think they've all finished school. Or there's only a few employees for it, but there's quite a number of volunteers, and all of them are attorneys. So they're a data collection place. But they do have contacts all over the United States for local law enforcement, state law enforcement. They can refer to housing, find places, and there's very few housing places in the United States. And so, actually it's about to be the anniversary. January 28, 2011, I did the first rescue and opened well house. And we are the first shelter in Alabama, and we're the fourth largest in the nation now. We're the only shelter in the nation that has access to private airplanes, and so we can transport. And we have actually rescued from Washington State to Miami, Florida. While I was executive director, I rescued about 250 women and girls. And it's a problem. We have a trafficking problem in the United States. The reason we've rescued across the United States is because of the lack of beds. So I wanted to make sure you had the crisis number there, because it's very important that you understand housing needs, because sometimes she has nowhere to go, and she does need housing. At this point, we only do 18 and over. But we have 3 programs, shelter, 30 to 45 days. Our long-term, we say, is 2 years, but we've had some ladies that have been with us longer. And we just opened this past Friday another transitional home on our property, because we have 4 houses out there. And what that is when she's finished our Next Steps to Freedom program, she can actually go into this home and stay up to a year. And it's less supervision. There's not a house parent in this house. She's kind of on her own, but it's still on the same property. And so she still has access to counselor, social worker, and everything there. And at the well house, we never charge a dime to any of the girls. The links down there, the Polaris Project, that's where the National Human Trafficking Resource Center comes from. They get the grant every, if I'm not mistaken, a federal grant that only goes to them, but they're the ones who actually do a lot of information. I've included some of that in here. You'll have at the end of this manual, you have let me look at what page it's on. One of my favorites, it's page 20, the sex-trafficking power and control wheel. It's kind of similar to the domestic violence wheel, but that comes from the Polaris Project. And you also have another link in your it wasn't one that was required for you to have in your hand during this training, but it's the Sex Trafficking Networks comparison chart of primary sex trafficking networks in the United States, and it just gives you a breakdown of that. The Polaris Project did that, so that's some really good stuff too. Prostitution Research and Education is a site that some stuff may be a little controversial on it for you, but it's really important to have if you've got questions. It's they do valid research, but there's also some opinion sections there too, just so you know. Shared Hope International is the one who addresses the demand, and that's the other article that was uploaded for you all. And of course, the Well House, that's our site, and the Trafficking Resource Center is actually a part of, if I'm not mistaken, between Polaris Project and Homeland Security. They bring that site together for a lot of resources. Mm-hmm. There is actually a place online at the Trafficking Resource Center that you can go state by state to find out what resources are available in those areas. So I think we've probably covered, I mean, my voice is getting tired. We've covered like question. I kind of see in the audience here, it's like looks of astonishment. And then I see some shaking of the heads going, I've known that for years. So, I mean, is there any other questions you got out there?
Well, I do have an email that came in, and it's kind of long. It's not really any questions, but I want to read it, and that way you can comment on it. It says, a story I'd like to share. Several years ago, we had a young woman who was being trafficked who came into our clinic. She did tell us about some of the things that she was going through. She got on depot, and when she returned 3 months later, I could not believe the change in her. She did not look like the same person that I remembered when I went to the waiting room. I asked her what had happened. She stated that she had left her boyfriend, Pimp, had asked her parents if she could come home again, and she had changed her life. She had quit the drugs and gone into GED classes. And she stated that our staff had treated her with dignity and respect, which she had not experienced in some time. She stated that she felt like being treated like this and realized that in order that she would have to make some changes. None of us were even aware of what we did that day, but to have such an effect and impact on her until she returned and shared that with us.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing. I am truly a believer of love and grace. I believe that grace, we are, as social workers, we're horrible about tough love and boundaries, and this is where, and I know you love from here and all this kind of stuff, but, I am a flawed individual, and if somebody hadn't showed me love and grace, I would not be where I'm at. Grace is the answer. When I worked for a state agency, I had the family from hell. We have them, everyone has one on their caseload, and guess what, they're the family from hell, and this mom and dad, they amazed me. But she told me, I saw her several years later, they got their kids back. I mean, I fought for them to get their kids back. But I also fought for her, and I gave her what for. But she had for a lot of times she came up positive for drugs when I first got the case. And finally there was a time she came up negative. And I left the office, when I got the results, I left the office and went to her house and visited her. And I said, I am so stinking proud of you. I am just so proud of you. And she's like, I used on such and such day, and it just didn't show up. She told me. She had told me, she's like, it didn't show up. It had been enough time. She said, but that's the last time I used. And I said, I'm proud of you. I am proud of you. She didn't use anymore. She didn't use anymore. She told me several years later, she said, Twan, no one's ever told me they were proud of me. I never heard that from anyone. So you never know in situations like that, especially with that dignity and respect, you never know how you can help someone or a difference you can make, because we just want to be accepted right where we're at, and that's across the board, not just trafficking victims. Did you have any other questions? I saw you were over there writing. Okay.
I was curious about what happens to any children that may be born in the stable.
Sometimes they're sold too. Not too long ago, the FBI does a nationwide thing every year in 84 cities, and in Birmingham they got a 6-week-old that was in a hotel.
Is that normal?
Yeah, sometimes families take custody, sometimes they become foster children, and sometimes they're used and sold too when they get a little older. Usually not much older, because commercial child sexual exploitation is real.
So a lot of times they will show up in child pornography. I'm
Absolutely,
assuming,
they'll show
right?
up in child pornography. I helped recently with a child pornography ring, and the youngest one was 1, and the oldest one was 14. And he groomed them from 1 to 4 and began using them at 4 years old, because at 4 years old they could physically be used.
Perform.
Yeah, perform. Probably won't ever be able to do, yeah, anyway. Yeah, that angers me. We're not going to talk about that one. But on all your links and your uploads, I really hope you enjoyed them. Of course, both the screening tools are there. And those, please share those with your coworkers. Share them with anyone. I would prefer that the Human Trafficking Training Resource Manual be used only for participants. I ask you not to make copies. I don't mind if someone borrows it. Renee can give permission for it to be used in any other situation.
Juan, we have a caller from Louisiana. Caller, go ahead with your question, please.
Okay. You had mentioned earlier something about substance abuse and addiction treatment and changing your views on that, and I was just curious about that and on the best way to treat that now, possibly.
There's drug abuse and drug use is not a it's not, that's not the problem. There's a problem preceding that. And what we tend to do with substance abuse treatments, we just address the drug use and the drug abuse. And I mean, I've worked in a number of substance abuse treatment centers and love them, but I have a problem that they want you to be clean to come in, and if you get high while you're there, they put you out. That does not make sense to me at all. You know, I've even written programs myself that are still being used that it was based on the same concept. Mm-hmm. If we don't address what happened before that first drug ever got put in, then we're missing it. We are missing it, whatever happened in that person's life. Drugs are a symptom. They are not the problem.
Okay. Okay, which kind of goes along with everything that you were just saying.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for calling.
We have one in the audience, too.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your story, and I'm very proud of you.
Thank you. I love you. One of my dear friends is here. Someone I've known for years and hadn't seen in a while, so it was really great to be here. Is there any other questions, email or phone? Anybody else have any questions?
I just want to say thank you. You have challenged me, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank
Okay.
you.
Well, we have a few more minutes, so we're going to let the numbers show up on the screen for a little bit longer to see if anybody wants to call in or send in any emails. And I do have a question. Everything we've said today has been about women, but what about men who are exploited? Is that an issue?
It is an issue. We teach our boys to be tough, though. So there's actually 2 men that I have helped for several years, and one called the hotline. The crisis line number used to come to my cell phone, and a man called me. He had been raped, and no one believed him. No one believed that a man could be raped, and he had been raped, and it was causing some severe issues. I actually have a few people that are adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse or childhood sexual exploitation that are men. There is no home in the United States for boys. One's about to open in North Carolina. Yeah, the first one. So it happens to boys too, but the issues with the boys being trafficked is that because they're made to perform, it's usually a homosexual act, but most of the boys are heterosexual, so they have really conflicting identity issues. And then on top of that, the way we teach our boys is that you're supposed to buck up and be strong, and you're not supposed to be weak, and this can't happen to you.
We have another call.
Okay.
Montgomery County, go ahead with your question.
Yes. Do you do this type of teaching at churches or just like webcast for ADPH?
No, ma'am. I actually was in a church this past weekend. I do this type of speak. Well, actually, I do more testimony when I'm at churches, and do a little bit more of a call to action with the churches, because I am a Christian. So yes, I would absolutely love to.
Okay. Well, is there any way that I can get your information?
You can. I tell you, if you would send an email in, I will make sure that I get your email, and I will get an email out to you. Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
If you can send that email to me, that's Renee.Carpenter, that's RENAE.Carpenter at adph.state.al.us. Then I'll make sure that Twan gets that information.
If there's anyone out there that wants any speaking engagements or anything, please email Renee. and get in touch. She'll make sure I get the information. I would be honored. It's a little bit different with churches and other situations.
We have another caller. Area 10, go ahead with your question.
Yes, I have a question regarding when these women are in this situation and finally get out and they're reunited with their families. I'd be interested in just if you would talk a little bit about that, and maybe when you were reunited with your mother and just that type thing, because I'd like to hear a little bit about that.
My mother and I we don't have a really good relationship right now. But there's quite a number of ladies who have gotten out that have reunited, and I have a great relationship with my kids. Sometimes it's estranged, but I have daughters, but I have other children also that I've informally adopted. But we've got a number of ladies who have been reunited with their children, been reunited with family, and then there's a number of ladies I know that don't want anything to do with their family because their family was part of the problem. Mm-hmm. So every situation is completely different.
Right, I can understand that. I just, because the women are so captive, I guess,
yes,
would be the word. They're so captive, and it's difficult for them to get out. That I just had that question about, and I know they may still feel a little bit of guilt or that type thing. So I just wanted some information about that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for this.
We feel a lot of guilt and a lot of shame for a long time. It's hard.
Okay, I think we have an email question.
Well, it's not a question, it's just a statement. It says, you're so courageous. Thank you for being so courageous and sharing your story.
Well, thank you.
Great.
Actually, I really appreciate being called courageous, but at the very beginning of me opening Well House and awareness being raised, I was called crazy on TV and radio more than once. Oh. Yeah, you really think you can make a difference is what I was asked. And I was like, if I help one, then I've made a difference, and that's all that matters.
The whole starfish
Yeah, that's it.
thing.
Help that one. That's all that matters.
Well, on that same note, how many women have you helped? How many have gone through that? How many have you rescued?
Personally, I've rescued about 200 when I was doing it by myself. Yeah.
Wow.
But I don't know. My story is gone. It was on the 700 Clubs a couple of years ago. It's being translated into 88 different languages in 88 countries. And so I got an email last week from the UK that she had just seen it, because it aired, even though it aired here a couple of years ago, it airs all over the world consistently. Literally got an email from the UK going, I do street outreach too. Give me some suggestions. And gotten emails from Africa. So I don't know. I try not to look at who all I've helped, because I get stuff all the time, and I just try to do what God asked me to do for the day.
Got it. Well, we have a call from Oklahoma. Oklahoma, go ahead with your question.
Yes, I was curious because I had a history of working with sex offenders, and I was wondering how, if you run across predators who are trying to get into this field.
If I run across predators that do what now?
That try to get in this field of helping human trafficking victims just because they re-victimizing, as you talked about earlier.
There are some people that I haven't had any personally, but I've heard some stories of people having other intentions than helping. But that's I think that's in any profession that someone can get in there, in any any area that they're trying to help in, that they could get in there for the wrong purposes.
Yeah. Well, and I think they prey on the most vulnerable people, and so I would warn people that, to do background checks and make sure that you're protecting these women.
Absolutely. We do background checks on our volunteers and everything. We don't have a problem with any, like I said, I'm a 2-time convicted felon, so I don't really have a problem with someone with a history. What we have a problem with is someone with a sexual history. Right. Or some kind of sex crime history. The problem with that, though, is Alabama, I had to fight Alabama because they were trying to make me register as a sex offender because of my prostitution charge at 16.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your work. It's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for calling. Anything else? Well, thank you so much. One more question that I do have. Roughly how many calls do you get
Oh, actually,
on your crisis line?
We have one person now, and that's all she does, 24/7.
Really?
That is her primary job. And it's, I think the last number she gave me was for like a 3-month period, and it was about 1,100 phone calls. Now, we're not able, those aren't always rescues. Sometimes they're
Right.
referrals, people want information or things like that. So, but her phone rings quite often. And she's really good. She gets a lot of, she gets like height, weight, and everything when she's on the phone with someone. That way we can identify.
Right.
Yeah. So it is really good. So.
And you do accept referrals from anywhere in the country?
Yes.
Okay.
We do.
Just making sure.
And our information is in there. Our crisis line is in there. I don't think I put our office number in there. I apologize. It's, if you want to write it down real quick, our office number is 800-991-9937.
And that is to the well house.
That's
right?
to the well house, yes.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you. This has been awesome.
Thank you all so much, and thank you. Thank you for coming. If you have any other questions that you think of after we go off the air, please feel free to send those to me, and I will put a frequently asked questions space on our document library so that we can get those questions answered and get them back out to you. But thank you all for joining us.